Hey everybody, Russell Camp. Welcome to Herbaceous ID. Today I wanted to continue the lesson or work that we were doing on irises. You know, when we did the little exploration exercise in Horticopia, we looked at different cultivars of irises. And that was just to kind of get us familiar with the buttons and the functionality of Horticopia, so that we'll be a little bit more familiar with it when we use it later. But I wanted to continue the theme, I guess is probably a better word, of irises, because Griffin is sometimes kind of informally known as the Iris City. And in all honesty, I kind of wish that was one of those things that somebody like the Chamber of Commerce would develop and make it into a big thing, because that just promotes our industry when people use irises and any sort of plant as a city logo, or as kind of a mascot, I guess, in a sense, for a city or a business or something like that. But today I wanted us to take it a little bit further and incorporate some of the ideas about handling perennials. We're going to get into identification and do a lot more with that, but I have a practical exercise that unless it's raining, and it might very well be, it's in the forecast, I want us to do this and gain some experience about how to handle certain perennials, tuberous or rhizomatous or bulbous perennials. So we're going to stick with irises for today. Now I'm here at the ramp going up to the greenhouse. A little bit different angle, so you may not notice it or recognize it right off. But I have behind me a little clump of iris, and I just chose this one because it was convenient for setting up the shot and all. But what I want to demonstrate is how we would dig and divide and prepare the soil and replant something like an iris. And this would also apply to canna lilies, even daylilies to a degree, but it's going to be easy on irises because their bulb structure is so big and so easy to see. We also have a bit of a mess here as we've gone through the shutdown in the spring and a unusual summer, to say the least. The weeds have gotten out of hand, and so we've got a lot of work to do to get it back looking nice. So we're going to begin with the irises, and we've got several clumps along this ramp. So what I'd like to do is show you how to dig, divide, prepare for replanting, prepare the plants rather, and prepare the site, and then replant them. What we'll end up with is, in some of these cases where we have big, really vigorous clumps, we'll thin those out, and we'll only return about, let's say we'll get 3 to 5 decent average sized clumps back in the ground where they are. So we'll kind of keep the colors intact. They're spaced out, and there's other things in between them in this planting. So let's don't mix them up. Let's don't add anything. I just want to dig them up, divide them, thin them out in a lot of cases, and put them back, but allow them room to grow. So in a couple of cases there will be a lot of surplus waste. So this may be up to Miss B. I'll leave the final call up to her, but I don't mind if, when everything's said and done and there's just a big pile of leftover iris tubers that might be going in the trash, if you want to take some home, then just keep them out of the trash. So let's begin, shall we? Okay, so I've gotten up on the top side of the wall, and I don't know that you'll be able to see me, but you can see what's important. So first of all, let me start out with the tools. I was looking for some pretty heavy duty garden snips. Pruners would be fine, and I think we have some in the classroom, but I found some little office scissors, and I think for this purpose they'll be okay, but I can at least demonstrate what we're doing. And I've got a digging device. I've got a short, this is called a D handle. Obviously if you can make a D out of this, then that's a D handle. But this is called a drain spade or sharpshooter. It's typically used for digging narrow trenches, but I like this kind of shovel for this kind of work because it's very precise. You don't have the big wide blade, like you do on a round point shovel. But if all you got's a round point, if we don't have enough tools to go around, if that's all you have on the job, then that is certainly fine. But what I'm finding as I'm looking at this, what's left of this planting, is that the Bermuda grass, then this is common Bermuda. You can tell how coarse it is, that it's common. That has really overrun this planting. So as we work, we want to clean that out because it's a pest. The old time gardeners and farmers used to call it devil grass because it is of the devil, believe me, if you're trying to keep it out of a garden. So I want to try to do this while wearing this microphone. We'll just see how it works. But so what I'm trying to do, that you can't see very well probably, is dig this clump up without chopping through that big fat tuber. This looks kind of like a potato. So I'm going to go out a few inches and poke around. I'm probably 4 to 6 inches away from this clump of foliage. Now in this kind of plant and with daylilies, this kind of arrangement is called a fan, and you'll hear me refer to having so many fans when we get towards the end. So naturally it's going to be difficult. So I'm hitting gravel and I'm trying to be gentle. Yeah, I'm beginning to get up under it. And I'm going to try to get as much of this clump out, and then we'll clean it up from there. So I'm just working it, just kind of trying to chop within the same place, and then kind of lever it a little bit and see how I'm doing. I don't have to necessarily. I see a little offset coming up here. I've been trampling it. Somebody has. Yeah, this is where it's kind of died back. There's a lot of gravel over here, and that's actually a dead tuber, the skin of it anyway. So there's been some struggles over here. And another reason you want to do this, first of all, irises will kind of lose vigor if you allow them to just grow forever. And not only do they lose vigor, they'll change color. Oftentimes something that's a very beautiful deep rich color will revert to all white. So it's important. The iris people, this is good. The iris people say every 3 years or so, 2 to 3 years, you probably should divide them and spread them out or give them away or throw them away so that they don't become overcrowded. And younger tubers tend to be more vigorous than the older ones anyway. So I'm getting up under it, and I continue to chop and lift, and there's bound to be some casualties. But That's a chance you got to take. You've heard the saying, if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. So we might be breaking a few eggs. So I'm being as gentle as I can, prying as I go, and I've gotten most of it out. So I'm going to stop and shift gears and kind of pull it away from the Bermuda grass. So you see what I've got. A fairly intact clump, low to a Bermuda. All these thick rhizomes. Well, it's rhizomes times 2 because there's rhizomes. Gosh, that's got a lovely aroma. It smells like a rotten sweet potato. Rhizomes are probably stolons actually of the Bermuda, and then the rhizomes of the irises. But if you can see that rotten place where it broke, I wish you could smell it, because it smells like somebody left a sweet potato in the bin too long. And I'm breaking it open to show you all the little galleries and tunnels. There are ants in there, and there are other critters like wireworms and other things that feed on decaying iris tubers. So that's some of that. But actually, if you were really hungry for divisions and offsets, you could actually cut away. And I'm going to try to cut it rather than break it. But I made a fresh cut, and even though that's really not a great division, that's usable if you're really trying to get the most bang for your buck. But this is what goes on the trash pile. So back to our clump here. The first thing we've got to do, let me say one other thing. The other reason I'm doing it now is because now fall is the time to divide and replant irises. They bloom. This kind of iris blooms in the spring, and they're done. Obviously, it's not spring. And if they are divided and put back in the ground right now, then they have time to establish roots and to get a good foothold before spring next year, and will perform really well. So you see the Bermuda grass that I'm pulling out, and it's leaving some nice runners of the iris, and the Bermuda is just wrapped all around these iris tubers. So I'm being kind of gentle. And it's a little bit easy to tell once you get it out of the ground, because the Bermuda tends to be lighter colored, almost white, where the irises are more, oh, that stinks, kind of a dirty, oh gosh, I don't know, tan. I got to get this rotten stuff off of here. It's making me lose my appetite. So lots of Bermuda grass. I don't want any Bermuda sprigs in here whatsoever. So I'm trying to gently wiggle it out, and it's really got a holt in there. Actually, I might have to go ahead and divide some of this to get some of this Bermuda out. You see how the Bermuda is almost coming out as one big piece. Oh, well, the iris is coming apart too, so that's fine. I'll just continue to wiggle the Bermuda out. So there's the iris, and this is nothing but Bermuda. That's all trash. So then we're left with this as a clump, and we've got this foliage, and this particular fan doesn't look that bad, but it's showing a little bit of wear and tear from the summertime. So I'm cleaning up the old foliage, pulling it off. I'm going to pull off some rotten. Actually, I'm going to cut them off with my pretend pruners. Yeah, that just popped right off. And if you can get a clean cut, in other words, get past the rotten part, it's kind of there's a risk that cut end will rot some more, but if you don't take it off, it probably surely will rot some more. So that little division just pulled right out. So I've got this, and I want to show you from the angle where you can see the tubers. I've got this big double jointed section leading over to this smaller one. So I'm going to leave that intact, and that would, well, and then see there's some more fans coming up at the base of this big one, if you can see that. So what we're going to do is clean this up so that it looks nice and neat when it goes back in. And what I'm going to do is just take this, and honestly, big garden shears are a little bit more suited to this because it's kind of thick. But I'm just going to cut them roughly in the shape that they're in, so I end up with that kind of look. I'll hold it up against a darker background. So that's a nice and neat look. And I'll trim that off. I'm going to trim that off as well. Pull some of this loose stuff off. Okay, so that is a pretty good looking division, and it's ready to go back in. Got nice roots on it. All these roots are healthy and succulent. They're not soft or shriveled. Or another way to check for healthy roots is if you tug on them and the outer skin pulls away and you leave a little wiry kind of interior core. That's not good. That's usually a root condition called rhizoctonia that irises get, and it's amazing that they do so well with all the maladies that they can incur. You know, between the wireworms and the Bermuda taking over, and you know, when they're in bloom, the bloom spikes will get aphids on them pretty bad. So anyway, we've got our division, nice looking division, and the final step is to prepare the ground to replant. So I'm not going to go to that step, and what I'm seeing is a whole lot more Bermuda. And what I recommend is that this be dug up, just like the iris were. Just dig up more of this area, kind of go down deep, lever it up, and really get the Bermuda out. Because if you leave this stuff in, and this applies to anywhere, if this gets in your pine straw islands and your shrubs, and you've got one little node right there, it can get started again. It doesn't matter. So, you know, leaving all this in the ground is just asking for trouble. Bermuda grass is the bane of our existence as gardeners and landscape managers and horticulturists, unless you're on a turf farm, and then different story. But anyway, you wouldn't be growing this kind of Bermuda normally, not for sod or sports turf. So I'm going to act as if I have cleaned this area out. I don't know if you can see that. Let me try to adjust here, see if I can get some angle. Maybe not. I think I'm tilted all the way. So basically dig a fresh area, and you see how these roots kind of spread out. You kind of want to spread them out as much as you can, kind of like they're growing. So in other words, you don't want to bunch them up, into a tiny little hole when you plant them. They want They want to be spread out, because however you put them in, that's how they stay. They'll grow new roots, but these roots cannot, like unfurl themselves underground. That doesn't happen. Another thing is, in case it doesn't show up, is that when the iris go back in the ground, what is that? You need to make sure you don't plant them too deep and you don't plant them too high. And the proper depth, honestly, most of the top of these rhizomes can be on the top of the ground. So if you can see these scissors, that's kind of where the ground should be. This can be lightly covered with mulch, with pine straw, or whatever your more gushy, nasty, soggy, wet rhizomes. Anyway, so this kind of goes back down, fluffing up the roots, cover them with nice loose soil, backfill. And bottom line is, you want to make sure above anything else that you have good drainage. Irises are pretty tough, but they will not tolerate bad drainage. So if you can plant them a little bit high, they will be the better for it. The last step, couple steps, would be obviously cleaning up. I'm not going to count that, but you would want to mulch this well with your mulch of choice, and we can argue about that later. And then water it. Always water anything that you plant new, even if it looks like it's about to pour down rain. I can't tell you how many plants I have lost, that they died, that I planted, where I trusted the weatherman to water them for me. Never do that. If you've got the soil nice and loose and well prepared, it's going to be really hard to overwater it. So water it very, very well, as if there weren't going to be any rain for days. And if it's prepared well and mulched well, and planted, a little bit high, like I mentioned, if you get too much water, it'll run away. The surrounding soil will soak it up. This is a little bit different situation, but if you're in a fairly normal landscape bed out in the landscape, and if you're watering a tiny little spot, just a few inches across, water has a way of traveling. Water, what does they say? Water follows the path of least resistance, kind of like electricity. So water will wick itself into the drier areas. So if this is all dry over here and you water it right here, the water will be wicked away to a large degree. So anyway, there's this little spot to finish. This is about sort of midway up. There's a big clump at the low end of this ramp. There's a big clump at the top end of the ramp. Now, there's challenges everywhere, not just the Bermuda grass, but on the lower end there's oregano, I think, growing amongst the irises. So that needs to be cut away, trimmed up. Just chop it. I don't care. My landscape management class is probably going to be working on the rest of this ramp at some point. On the top end, there's a big old thing of poke salad that you really need to get the root. The root's going to be as big around as your thumb, if you can get it. And there are some wild blackberries in there, which will break the skin. They're pretty armed. So anyway, if there are more people than we can safely get in these three areas, then if you continue up the ramp to the rain garden, continue this direction up the hill, there's a big clump of variegated canna lilies called Bengal tiger, and they can be treated virtually identically to this. You can't really cut fans. They don't have a fan, but you can cut back the foliage significantly to clean them up. So let's do that, and that'll be our lab for the day. Alrighty. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.